In 1962, India's Atomic Energy Commission made a promise: 25,000 megawatts of nuclear power by 1987. 7 years later, they raised it, 43,500 megawatts by the year 2000. It is now 2026. India has 8,780. That is not a story about bad science. These were people who built a nuclear device in secret with 1960s technology and took the world completely by surprise. It is a story about one afternoon in the Rajasthan desert and the 34 years that came after it. Start with the part most people get wrong. India was not late to nuclear power. India was early. On the 28th of October, 1969, 2 American-built reactors switched on at Tarapur, north of Bombay. India's first commercial nuclear power station. The man behind it was Homi Bhabha, and his plan was not modest. India has very little uranium, but it holds roughly a quarter of the world's high-grade thorium. So Bhabha designed a program in 3 stages: uranium reactors first, then fast breeders, then thorium, a fuel India already owned. It is still one of the most ambitious energy plans any country has ever written down. At that moment, China had nothing, not one power reactor. China would not connect its first until 1991, 22 years behind. Today, China generates 9 times more nuclear electricity than India. 488 terawatt-hours a year against 54. A 22-year head start turned into a 9-fold deficit. Here is how. 1960, Canada gives India a research reactor, 40 megawatts. The United States supplies the heavy water that makes it run. They call it CIRUS, Canada, India, United States. The conditions are written down, peaceful purposes only. Canada stipulates it, and the American heavy water contract spells it out. But CIRUS is not under international safeguards. Nobody is inspecting what comes out of it. What comes out of it is plutonium. On the 18th of May, 1974, in the desert at Pokhran, India detonates a device built from that plutonium. The message sent back to Delhi was 3 words: "The Buddha is smiling." India called it a peaceful nuclear explosion. Almost nobody else did. What followed was not a protest, it was an institution. Within a year, 7 countries sat down together. Canada, the United States, Britain, France, Japan, West Germany, the Soviet Union. They formed the Nuclear Suppliers Group and first met in November 1975. Its purpose was to make sure no country could ever again take civilian nuclear help and turn it into a weapon. It was created because of India. And it was aimed at India. From that point, India could not buy a reactor, could not buy a component, could not buy a kilogram of uranium from the countries that sold it. Not for a year, not for a decade. For 34 years. And this is where most tellings of this story go wrong. The embargo did not stop India's bomb. In May 1998, India went back to the same desert and tested 5 more devices. More sanctions followed. The weapons program carried on regardless. Because the weapons program was indigenous, it did not need anything from abroad. What needed things from abroad was the electricity. India mines only about 300 tons of uranium a year. And the weapons program takes its share of that first. So the power stations starved. By the middle of 2008, India's nuclear plants were running at roughly half their capacity. Not broken, not obsolete, just empty. One Indian official told the BBC the country had fuel to last until the end of 2006. There was one gap in the wall. Russia kept building at Kudankulam, arguing the agreement predated the rules. One supplier for a country of 1 billion people, it was not enough to matter. That is the real cost of 1974, not the weapons, the kilowatt-hours. Now put China beside it. China tested its first bomb in 1964, 10 years before India. But China signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It stayed inside the system, and the system sold to it. French reactors, Russian reactors, Canadian reactors. It bought the designs, learned them, and then built its own at enormous speed. India had to invent everything twice, once because it wanted to, and once because it had no choice. That is a genuinely impressive engineering story. It is also a much slower one. And to be fair to the record, China did not only have access, it also built at a scale India never attempted. The 6th of September 2008, Vienna. The Nuclear Suppliers Group, by then 45 countries, meets and makes an exception. India can trade again. Without signing the Non-Proliferation Treaty, without giving up a single weapon. No other country on Earth has been given that. From the test to the waiver, 34 years. So added up, India today runs 24 reactors, 8,780 megawatts. About 3% of its electricity. France runs on nearly 70. The 1969 forecast promised 43,500 megawatts by the year 2000. India is 26 years past that deadline at a fifth of that number. On a technology it reached before almost anyone else in Asia. And the damage compounds in a way one number hides. Stage 2 of Babha's plan, the fast breeders, arrived decades late, because Stage 1 never grew to the size that was supposed to feed it. 34 years without imports did not only cost reactors. It cost the learning curve that makes the next ones cheaper and faster. Which brings us to the promise India is making now. 100 gigawatts of nuclear power by 2047. That is more than 11 times what it has today. Built in 21 years, by a country that took 57 to build the first 8. That is a target, not a forecast. India has announced targets before. But this time, one thing has genuinely changed. Parliament has repealed the Atomic Energy Act of 1962, the law that made nuclear power a state monopoly. For the first time, private companies can build reactors in India. Because the state alone was never going to reach 100 gigawatts, it has had 57 years to try. Reactors are going up now. Capacity is meant to reach 22 gigawatts by 2032. That would be more building in 7 years than in the previous 40. India has missed every nuclear target it ever set, 1962, 1969, 2000. But it missed most of them, locked outside a door it had shut on itself. That door opened in 2008. Which makes the next 21 years the first fair test India has ever had.